My dad refused to walk me down the aisle because I married a woman, so I walked myself and never looked back. The day I walked down the aisle alone was the day I finally set myself free. Free from expectations, from suffocating judgments, and from the invisible chains that had bound me for so many years. My name is Julia Harper, and I'm 29 years old. The name Julia, derived from Latin, means youthful, soft. Yet my life, or at least my childhood and adolescence, was anything but soft or youthful. I grew up in a traditional, some might even say, strictly conservative family, in a small, quiet town that people often called the epitome of conventional. Everything in my house was meticulously arranged, from the perfectly placed tea set on the living room table to the unspoken rules of conduct I had to follow from a very young age. We lived in a world of neatly trimmed hedges and whispered gossip where appearances were everything, and deviation from the norm was simply not tolerated. Even the way I was expected to sit at dinner, hands folded in my lap, seemed to reinforce a sense of rigid order. My father, Robert Harper, was a respectable man in the eyes of everyone around us. He owned a small but well-known lumber mill in the area, always prioritizing neatness, honor, and traditional values. For him, family was everything, and that meant children had to be well-behaved, academically successful, and most importantly, settled down according to the precise mold society and family had set. From childhood, I absorbed these ideals. Dad would always say, "Julia, a girl should be gentle. She should know how to run a household. When you grow up, you must marry a worthy man, someone with a stable job who knows how to provide for his family. That is the true happiness of a woman." His voice was deep and warm, but sometimes his eyes would gleam with a chilling determination when he spoke of such things. It wasn't just about finding a husband. It was about upholding the family name, ensuring the continuation of a lineage he envisioned as perfectly straight and unwavering. I always strived to be the perfect daughter my father desired. I studied diligently, always at the top of my class, participated in church charity activities, and even learned to cook and sew, practicing the delicate stitches my mother taught me, always hoping for a word of praise from him. I believed that as long as I did exactly what my parents taught me, I would be loved unconditionally, that he would be proud of me. Each time I brought home an award certificate or perfectly completed a household chore, my father's gaze would soften and he would give a slight nod. Just that single nod was enough to fill my heart with joy, a fleeting moment of warmth that I chased relentlessly. I yearned to see his genuine smile, a smile that didn't come with any conditions attached, a smile that simply said, "I love you, my daughter." But life wasn't a pre-written textbook. As I grew, the emotions and thoughts within me began to diverge, taking a different path, one I knew would never receive my father's nod of approval. There were subtle hints even in my early years. While other girls swooned over boys in movies, I found myself drawn to the stories of strong, independent women. I preferred adventures in the woods to tea parties, and always felt a quiet sense of disconnect when my friends talked about their crushes on the football team captain. These were small seeds of difference, barely perceptible, but they were there, growing beneath the surface of the carefully cultivated image I presented to the world. This developing awareness of my own distinctness became a secret I buried deep within my heart, a part of myself I dared not share with anyone, not even my mother, a gentle, quiet woman who always stood silently behind my father. Her own dreams, perhaps long since, faded into the background of his rigid authority. The weight of this secret grew heavier, with each passing year pressing down on my chest like an invisible stone. I often felt like a carefully crafted doll posed perfectly in a display case, while my true self struggled for breath inside. Every decision, every interaction was filtered through the lens of, will this please my father? Or, will this expose my truth? The constant vigilance was exhausting, slowly eroding the genuine joy from my younger years. When I turned 29, the age my father expected me to be married with children and living a stable life, according to his definition, I had already spent years navigating this labyrinth of hidden desires and outward conformity. The pressure to conform was immense, a silent drumbeat in my head, reminding me of my family's expectations. But the desire for authenticity for a life lived truly had finally become stronger than the fear of their disapproval. That year, I made a decision that would change my entire life. A decision that I knew would shatter every expectation, every mold the family had painstakingly built. When I told him I was marrying a woman, he didn't say a word. I can still picture that moment as if it were yesterday. We were in the living room, the familiar scent of old wood and polish hanging in the air. I had rehearsed the words 1,000 times in my head, but when they finally escaped my lips, they felt foreign, alien to the meticulously ordered space we inhabited. His eyes, usually so sharp and commanding, simply stared through me as if I had suddenly become transparent. There was no rage, no tears, no dramatic outburst. Just an unsettling emptiness, a vast chasm where I had expected at least some form of acknowledgement, even if it was anger. His face remained impassive, a mask of stone. His silence in that moment was more terrifying than any shouting could have been. Not a single question, not a single reproach, just an unsettling emptiness in his eyes. I had prepared for an outburst, a long lecture about family honor, but instead, he just remained silent, and that silence stretched on, not just for minutes, but for days, for weeks, a suffocating blanket that settled over our home. It stretched until I knew deep in my bones what it truly meant, until he refused to walk me down the aisle. It was not a refusal shouted in anger, but a stark, unspoken truth that hung in the air heavier than any spoken word. The silence had been his answer all along. My childhood wasn't a diary filled with the bright echoes of laughter or the carefree mischief of neighborhood kids. It was a canvas painted with careful, meticulous strokes, where every shade had to adhere to a strict set of rules my father had laid out. From a very young age, I understood that love in my family sometimes came with invisible conditions. My father, Robert, loved me in his own way. He always made sure I had everything. From the neatest clothes, brand new textbooks, to meals served on time and in full. He spent hours teaching me math, checking my homework every evening, and always proudly boasted to his friends about my academic achievements. Whenever I brought home an A or a compliment from a teacher, his rare smile would appear and he'd gently ruffle my hair. These were the most precious moments of my childhood, rare sunbeams that dispelled the chill of the rules. I remember the weight of his hand, heavy but comforting, a fleeting reassurance that I was for that moment enough. However, that affection was always coupled with an unseen pressure. A pressure to be perfect, to constantly strive to meet his expectations. I vividly recall one incident when I was about 7 years old. I accidentally broke my mother's prized porcelain vase while playing indoors. It was just an accident, but my father's reaction was profoundly different. He didn't yell. He didn't punish me physically. Instead, he simply looked at me with a deep, crushing disappointment in his eyes, then turned his back and left without a word. That silence and that gaze, they haunted me more than any scolding ever could. I cried uncontrollably, not out of fear of punishment, but from the overwhelming feeling that I had let him down, that I had shattered the perfection he expected. From then on, I learned that making mistakes was simply unacceptable. I had to be cautious, always, always perfect. It was a lesson etched into my very being. I was always striving to please my father. As the only daughter, I felt the immense weight of his expectations on my shoulders. I knew he wanted me to become a proper traditional woman, someone who would bring honor to the family through a correct marriage. I learned to speak softly, to walk gracefully. I spent hours in the kitchen with my mother, learning to cook traditional dishes, to embroider, to sew, everything he deemed suitable for a daughter. I did all of these things not because I wholeheartedly loved them, but because I craved to see that look of pride in his eyes, to hear him say, "My daughter is so well behaved." I practiced my piano scales until my fingers ached, not for the joy of music, but for the approval it might bring. Every decision, every activity was subtly shaped by the unspoken question, "Will this earn my father's praise?" As I grew older, I started to notice things within myself that didn't quite fit these molds. When other girls my age giggled and whispered about their first boyfriends, about stolen glances and secret love letters, I felt out of place. My heart didn't flutter at the sight of the strong, charming boys at school. Instead, I found myself drawn to something different, to stories of powerful, independent women, those who dared to live outside the conventional path. I devoured books about female explorers, pioneering artists, and revolutionaries who broke down barriers to pursue their passions. There was a quiet resonance in their defiance, a spark that ignited something deep within me. I began to sense a profound disparity between my true self and the person my family, especially my father, wanted me to become. This feeling was akin to being an actor on a grand stage, constantly having to ensure that the perfect mask never slipped. While outwardly I was a compliant, polite girl, internally I harbored a world full of questions, of secret desires that I dared not voice to anyone. Some nights I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering, was there anyone else in the world like me? Could anyone understand the feeling of being torn between loyalty to my family and the desperate longing to be myself? I remember one time in high school, a close friend confided in me about falling for a boy. She spoke with uninhibited joy about the burning feelings, the shy hand-holding. When it was my turn, I awkwardly fabricated a harmless crush on some unobtrusive boy. The feeling of lying to my friend, of lying to myself, was truly unsettling. I realized that I wasn't just hiding from my parents, but from the entire world around me. I had constructed an invisible wall around myself, ensuring no one could touch the deepest, most unconventional part of me. This wall became both my prison and my shield, keeping me safe, but also profoundly alone. I tried desperately to convince myself that these feelings were temporary, that I would eventually normalize like everyone else. I forced myself to go on a few dates with boys from school, desperately trying to conjure even a flicker of attraction. I'd analyze their gestures, their words, searching for any spark, but my heart remained unresponsive. A blank slate. Each date felt like a meticulously choreographed play with me as the lead actress trying to embody a girl in love. But deep down, I knew it wasn't me. It was a performance, and the audience was my own longing for normalcy, for acceptance. And then the day I left that house, that small town filled with its rigid conventions, to step through the doors of college, I knew that it was my only chance to begin discovering my true self. A self I had kept hidden for far too long. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew I couldn't continue living in that gilded cage any longer. Though the fear of my father's disappointment lingered, the yearning for freedom, for the authenticity of being myself, had become stronger than ever before. It was a quiet rebellion, a first breath of true air. Leaving home for college felt like stepping out of a meticulously crafted diorama and into a vast, sprawling landscape. Suddenly, the air felt different, lighter, filled with possibilities I hadn't even dared to imagine. It was a terrifying freedom, but also exhilarating. My arrival at the university was less about academic pursuits at first, and more about shedding the skin of the perfect daughter I had worn for so long. The campus was a vibrant tapestry of different faces, ideas, and ways of life. No one knew Robert Harper, the strict lumber mill owner, or his impeccably behaved daughter. Here I was, just Julia. It was a relief so profound it almost brought me to tears. I experimented with my wardrobe, cutting my hair shorter, and even trying coffee for the first time. Tiny acts of rebellion that felt monumental. I joined clubs that sparked my interest, not those chosen to impress my father. I found myself drawn to literature and art subjects, where interpretation and personal expression were celebrated, a stark contrast to the black and white certainties of my upbringing. It was during one of these literature classes, specifically an elective on contemporary American poetry, that I first saw Melissa. She sat in the back row, often with a sketchbook open on her lap, drawing intricate patterns while the professor lectured. Her laugh was a soft, melodious sound that seemed to float above the usual classroom chatter. She had a mop of unruly curls and eyes that sparkled with an intelligent mischief. I was instantly, inexplicably drawn to her. It wasn't the kind of superficial attraction I'd feigned with boys in high school. This was deeper, an almost magnetic pull towards a spirit that felt profoundly kindred to my own. We started talking after class first about the assigned readings, then about our majors, our dreams. Melissa was an art history major, fiercely independent and unapologetically herself. She spoke with a passion I had never encountered, her words painting vivid pictures of artists and movements. She challenged my quiet assumptions about the world, but not in an aggressive way. She simply presented a different perspective, a broader horizon. With Melissa, I didn't have to be perfect. I could stumble over my words, admit I didn't know something, or share a silly thought, and she would just smile genuinely. Our friendship deepened rapidly. We spent countless hours in the campus library, not always studying, but often just talking for hours, sharing late-night pizza, and exploring the hidden nooks and crannies of the city. She was the first person I truly felt I could be vulnerable with, the first person who saw beyond the polished facade and seemed to genuinely appreciate the messy, uncertain girl beneath. And slowly, imperceptibly, at first, my feelings for her began to shift. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something warmer, more potent, a tenderness that settled in my chest every time she laughed or looked at me with those knowing eyes. The first time I truly acknowledged it to myself, I was terrified. We were studying late one night, and she leaned over to explain a concept, her hair brushing my cheek, and a jolt went through me. It wasn't just a friendly touch. My heart pounded. My palms grew sweaty, and a wave of confusion mixed with an undeniable pull washed over me. This feeling, this intense, undeniable attraction was so different from anything I had ever experienced with a boy. It was real, overwhelming, and utterly terrifyingly forbidden by every lesson my father had ever taught me. The conflict began to simmer. On one hand, there was this exhilarating, life-affirming connection with Melissa, a feeling of finally finding where I belonged. On the other, there was the deeply ingrained fear of my father's judgment, the image of his disapproving gaze, and the very real possibility of losing my family if I followed my heart. I started to hide Melissa from my family, even implicitly. When my mother called, I'd speak vaguely about my friends, never mentioning Melissa by name if I could avoid it. If my parents planned a visit, I'd make sure Melissa wasn't around, concocting excuses about her busy schedule. The pretense was exhausting. Every lie, every omission felt like a betrayal of the person I was becoming. I loved Melissa deeply, profoundly, in a way I hadn't known was possible. She was my anchor, my confidant, and the person who showed me what true acceptance felt like. But the shadow of my past, the weight of my father's expectations, still loomed large. I lived in a constant state of anxiety, caught between two worlds, desperately trying to keep them separate. I saw other students openly expressing their identities, their relationships, and a part of me yearned for that freedom. But another, stronger part, crippled by years of conditioning, whispered warnings about shame and abandonment. Melissa, with her incredible empathy, sensed my apprehension. She never pushed, never demanded. She simply offered her unwavering support, her patient understanding. There were times she'd ask gently, "Are you okay, Julia? You seem so distant sometimes when you talk about home." And I'd offer some vague reassurance, unwilling or unable to articulate the depth of my fear. But the truth was, the more I fell in love with her, the more intensely the internal struggle raged. I was caught between the fierce joy of our connection and the crippling fear of what that connection would mean for my relationship with my family. Our love story blossomed in the quiet corners of the campus, away from prying eyes, under the cloak of whispered conversations and stolen glances. It was beautiful, pure, and terrifying. I knew deep down that this was real, that Melissa was the person I was meant to be with. But the bridge between this new, authentic Julia and the old life I had left behind seemed impossibly long, fraught with uncertainty and the potential for irreparable damage. Little did I know this silent conflict was just the beginning of a much larger journey of self-acceptance and defiance. The truth, like a persistent seed, had finally pushed through the hardened earth of my fears. I couldn't keep living a double life, whispering my love for Melissa in the shadows, while painting a false picture for my family. The weight of the secret had become unbearable. It was time to break free, even if it meant shattering everything I thought I knew about my place in the world. The decision to come out wasn't a sudden burst of courage. It was a slow, agonizing process. Melissa, bless her patient heart, never pressured me. She simply loved me unequivocally, and her love became the bedrock upon which my courage finally began to solidify. I saw the quiet pain in her eyes, sometimes knowing she was being hidden, and that pain mirrored my own. I wanted to be whole, to be authentic, not just for myself, but for us. The summer after our junior year of college, I knew it was time. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Every mile felt like a year, every familiar landmark a reminder of the life I was about to disrupt. I had rehearsed the words 1,000 times in my head. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something important. I'm in love with someone. Her name is Melissa and she's a woman. Simple, direct, brutally honest. I chose a quiet Sunday afternoon after lunch, when the air usually hung heavy with the lull of family routine. My mother was clearing the table and my father was settled in his armchair reading the newspaper. The familiar scent of roasted chicken hung in the air, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Mom, Dad, can we talk for a moment? My mother paused a plate in her hand, her eyes soft with concern. My father lowered his newspaper, his gaze sharp, immediately sensing the shift in atmosphere. I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat, but I forced them out. I'm in love, and I want you to meet her. Her name is Melissa, and she's a woman. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of an afternoon nap. It was the kind of silence that screams a void where sound used to be. My mother's hand trembled, and the plate clattered softly as she placed it back on the table. Her face drained of color, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound sadness. She looked at me, then at my father, a silent plea in her gaze. My mother's reaction was exactly as I had feared, and yet also surprisingly understated. Painful but silent. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her shoulders slumped, and her eyes welled up with unshed tears. She didn't cry out, didn't scream, didn't even utter a single word of reproach. She simply absorbed it. The pain etched itself onto her gentle face, a silent testament to her sorrow, perhaps even her fear of what this meant for me, for us. She just stood there looking utterly heartbroken, as if a cherished dream had just shattered into a million pieces at her feet. That quiet sorrow, that lack of outward anger, was almost more devastating than a loud outburst. It spoke volumes of her deep sadness, a sadness perhaps for a life she envisioned for me that would now never be. Then I turned to my father. He sat perfectly still in his armchair, the newspaper now forgotten on his lap. His face was a mask devoid of any discernible emotion. No anger, no surprise, no disappointment. Just an unnerving stillness. His eyes, usually so expressive, were like cold, hard stones. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He didn't even sigh. He just sat there, frozen, as if he hadn't heard a single word I'd said. And that's how it stayed for 2 full weeks. 2 weeks of suffocating silence. 2 weeks of walking on eggshells in my own home. My father wouldn't look at me, wouldn't speak to me. He'd come home from work, eat dinner in silence, and retreat to his study. The air in the house was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of his disapproval. My mother would try to maintain some semblance of normalcy, preparing meals, asking about my day, but her voice was strained, her eyes constantly filled with a quiet grief. I tried to talk to my father, to explain, to plead for understanding. I'd stand in his doorway, but he'd simply turn his back or immerse himself deeper in his paperwork. It was as if I had become invisible, erased from his world. This wasn't anger, it was something far worse. It was absolute rejection, a complete disavowal of my existence as his daughter. Then one evening, as I was about to leave to head back to campus, he called my name. My heart leaped with a desperate hope. Was he finally going to talk to me? To understand? To perhaps even try to accept? I turned, my breath held captive in my lungs. He looked at me, his eyes still utterly devoid of warmth, and he said just one sentence. "You've embarrassed this family." Nee. It wasn't shouted. It was delivered in a low, even tone, each word a carefully placed stone meant to crush. "You've embarrassed this family. Not you've disappointed me. Not you've made a mistake, but embarrassed? As if my very existence, my love, my truth was a stain on their pristine reputation, a public disgrace. It was the ultimate dismissal, a judgment passed without trial, without appeal. In that single sentence, he stripped away years of my efforts to please him, years of striving for his approval. He reduced my deepest truth to mere social inconvenience. My breath hitched. The words hung in the air colder than any winter wind. There was no room for discussion, no space for explanation, no possibility of reconciliation. His eyes, still like ice, confirmed it. He had drawn a line in the sand, and I was clearly on the wrong side. In that moment, I realized that the love I had sought from him was indeed conditional, and my truth had just failed the ultimate test. The silence that followed was different from the 2 weeks before. This was a final, definitive silence, the sound of a door slamming shut, not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating click. His words, "You've embarrassed this family," echoed in the hollow spaces of our home for weeks long after I left. They weren't just words. They were a sentence, a decree of my exile. The estrangement wasn't a sudden dramatic break, but a slow, agonizing fade, like a photograph left in the sun, slowly losing its color until only a faint outline remained. After that chilling encounter, I knew there was no going back to the way things were. The unspoken contract of my childhood, that my father's love was contingent on my obedience to his vision, had been irrevocably broken. I returned to campus not with a sense of rebellion, but with a profound ache in my chest, a wound that felt fresh and raw. The calls from home grew fewer and farther between. My mother, bless her heart, would still call occasionally, her voice hushed, filled with a fragile hope that I might come to my senses. But even her calls became strained, filled with awkward silences, as if she were trying to speak through a thick pane of glass. She never mentioned Melissa, never asked about my life, only about my grades, my health, surface-level inquiries that avoided the elephant in the room. My father, true to his word, never contacted me directly. No calls, no emails, no letters. It was a silence so absolute it was louder than any argument we could have had. It was a silence that screamed his disapproval, his utter disownment. He didn't need to explicitly tell me I was no longer welcome. His silence was a clear, unambiguous message. You no longer exist to me. It was as if a part of my past, a core piece of my identity tied to my family, had been surgically removed. The pain was excruciating, a phantom limb-ache for a connection that was no longer there. I often imagined him going about his daily life meticulously arranged, just as our home was erasing any trace of me. My pictures, my childhood drawings, were they still on display or tucked away in a dusty box in the attic? The uncertainty was a subtle torment. It was during this period of profound isolation that Melissa became my literal and emotional anchor. Seeing the pain in my eyes, she didn't try to fix it or offer empty platitudes. She simply was there. She listened, held me when I cried, and offered the quiet strength I desperately needed. She understood the depth of my loss, even though she couldn't fully comprehend the complexities of my traditional upbringing. Her empathy was a balm to my wounded soul. Eventually, the campus dorms felt too temporary, too transient for the life Melissa and I were building. We decided to take a leap and move into a small apartment together off campus. It was a tiny space filled with mismatched furniture and the scent of instant coffee, but it was ours. It was the first place where I truly felt I could breathe, where I didn't have to pretend, where every corner resonated with authenticity. This small apartment became my sanctuary, my first true home, away from the one that had rejected me. With Melissa, I learned to cook meals that were ours, not just traditional dishes. We painted the walls. Vibrant colors chose art that spoke to us and filled the space with laughter that echoed freely without fear of judgment. Life with Melissa was a stark contrast to my past. There was an ease, a freedom that I had never experienced. We shared everything: dreams, fears, mundane daily tasks, and the profound joys of discovering life together. She introduced me to her family, a warm, boisterous group who embraced me without question. Her mother, a kind woman with a ready smile, welcomed me with open arms, something I hadn't realized how much I craved. Hearing her call me dear felt like a gentle healing balm. It was in their home that I learned what unconditional family love truly felt like. A love that didn't scrutinize my choices or demand conformity, but simply celebrated my presence. As Melissa and I discussed our future, the topic of marriage naturally arose. It wasn't a question of if, but when. We knew deep in our hearts that we were meant to spend our lives together. The thought of formalizing our commitment filled me with a quiet joy, but also a lingering sadness. A wedding for me was always inextricably linked to my father walking me down the aisle, a symbol of his blessing, his pride. Now that dream felt like a shattered fragment. Despite the profound silence from my family, a tiny foolish spark of hope still flickered within me. Perhaps when faced with the undeniable reality of my commitment, my father would relent. Perhaps seeing my happiness he would understand. It was a desperate, irrational hope, born from years of yearning for his acceptance. So when the time came to plan our wedding, I did something that felt both defiant and incredibly vulnerable. I had custom wedding invitations printed. Beautiful minimalist with both our names on them clearly stating, Julia Harper and Melissa Chen request the honor of your presence. I mailed an invitation to my parents' address, meticulously writing their names on the envelope, my hand trembling slightly. I didn't include a personal note, just the formal invitation. It was a silent plea, a last offering, a chance for them to acknowledge my life, my partner, my happiness. I waited, and I waited. Every day I checked the mailbox with a mixture of dread and anticipation. But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into a month. There was no response. No RSVP card returned. No phone call. No email. Nothing. The silence was absolute. It confirmed what I already knew in my heart but had desperately tried to deny. They wouldn't be there. The invitation, a beacon of hope, had landed in a void. It was a confirmation of my complete estrangement, a stark reminder that I was now truly on my own, building a new family, a new life, far removed from the one I had left behind. In that moment, a profound sense of resignation settled over me, replacing the last vestiges of that desperate hope. It was painful, yes, but also strangely a step closer to true liberation. The day before my wedding should have been a whirlwind of excitement, a joyous countdown to the happiest day of my life. And in many ways, it was. Melissa and I spent the morning putting finishing touches on decorations, laughing over last-minute mishaps, and basking in the glow of our impending union. But beneath that surface of joy, a tiny, persistent ache throbbed in my chest. It was the whisper of a hope I couldn't quite let go, of a hope for a reconciliation that seemed increasingly impossible. Despite the months of silence, the unreturned RSVP, and the clear message of estrangement, a part of me, the little girl who still yearned for her father's approval, held on to a desperate fantasy. I kept imagining him, perhaps quietly, perhaps even reluctantly, showing up at the wedding. Maybe he wouldn't walk me down the aisle, but he would be there, a silent presence in the back row, a nod of acknowledgement that he hadn't entirely erased me from his life. It was a fragile, illogical hope fueled by years of conditioning and the deep-seated human need for parental acceptance. I spent a good portion of that day amidst the joyful chaos of preparations, glancing at my phone, checking emails. Every notification sent a jolt of nervous energy through me. Was it him? A text? An email? Anything? But each time it was just a friend confirming their arrival, or a vendor finalizing a detail. The silence from my family was absolute, a heavy blanket that threatened to smother even the most joyous moments. Melissa, ever observant, noticed my occasional distraction. She'd squeeze my hand, offer a reassuring smile, or gently pull me back into the present moment. Her presence, a steadying force against the swirling anxieties in my mind. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across our little apartment, the reality of the next day began to truly sink in. Tomorrow I would walk down that aisle, and it would be without my father. The thought was a sharp pang, a grief for something that should have been but never would be. The finality of it pressed down on me. I knew rationally that I had chosen my path, that my happiness with Melissa was paramount. But the child within me still craved that one last gesture, that sign of love, from the man who had shaped so much of my early life, even if through his rigid expectations. Around 8 o'clock that evening, when Melissa had stepped out to pick up some last-minute groceries, I found myself alone with my thoughts. The apartment, usually filled with our easy banter, felt too quiet. My phone lay on the coffee table, a black rectangle holding the answer I both longed for and dreaded. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the messages icon. My father's contact was still there, untouched for months. My fingers trembled as I typed. It wasn't a long message. It wasn't accusatory or angry or even overtly emotional. It was simply a desperate, raw plea, a final reach across the chasm he had created. I still want you to walk me down the aisle, Dad. I stared at the screen, watching the message send the small checkmark confirming its delivery. My heart pounded in my ears. Every fiber of my being was focused on that phone, willing it to vibrate, to light up with a reply. I imagined him reading it. Would his face soften? Would he feel even a flicker of regret? Would the decades of shared history, the faint echoes of his love, break through his hardened exterior? I waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 30 minutes. An hour. The screen remained dark, silent, no response. The silence this time was different. It wasn't the cold, shocking silence of his initial reaction, nor the oppressive, drawn-out silence of the estrangement. This was the silence of finality. A complete and utter absence of acknowledgement. It was the sound of a door being shut, definitively bolted from the inside. There would be no last-minute reprieve, no softening of his stance, no unexpected appearance. The hope, that tiny, foolish flicker, was finally extinguished. A wave of profound sadness washed over me, a grief so sharp it made my eyes sting. It wasn't just about the walk down the aisle anymore. It was about the complete severing of a bond I had clung to for so long. The knowledge that he was choosing his ideology over his own daughter. But with that sadness, something else began to stir. A quiet, burning resolve. This was it. This was the final answer. And it meant that I was truly, unequivocally free to forge my own path, to define my own family, to build a life based on love and acceptance, not on conditions and expectations. When Melissa returned, she found me sitting on the sofa, the phone discarded beside me. I didn't need to say anything. She simply sat beside me, pulled me into her arms, and held me tight. In her embrace, I found the strength to let go of the last threads of that old life. The silence from my father had spoken volumes, and now my own silence. My acceptance of that truth spoke volumes too. Tomorrow I would walk down that aisle, not with a void beside me, but with the boundless love of the woman waiting at the end, and the knowledge that my true family was already by my side, in spirit and in heart. The morning of my wedding dawned with a peculiar blend of sunshine and shadow. Outside, the sky was a clear, brilliant blue, promising a beautiful day. But inside me, a storm of conflicting emotions raged. It was the day I had dreamed of, the culmination of a love story that felt utterly right. Yet it was also the day the final, definitive absence of my father would be undeniable. I woke up before Melissa, the first rays of dawn barely peeking through the curtains of our apartment. For a moment, suspended in that pre-dawn quiet, I felt a familiar ache. It was the weight of absence, a phantom limb of longing for a parental blessing that would never come. My mind replayed the silent, unreturned message from the night before, a stark reminder of the chasm that now separated me from my past. The joy that should have been pure was tinged with a quiet melancholy. A part of me, the little girl who still yearned for unconditional love, mourned the picture-perfect wedding I would never have, the one with my father proudly walking me down the aisle. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Melissa, and walked to the window. The city was just beginning to stir, a gentle hum rising from below. I thought of my childhood home miles away, wondering if my parents were awake, if they were thinking of me. A foolish thought, perhaps, given their prolonged silence. But the heart holds on to hope, even when the mind knows better. The grief I felt wasn't for the lack of a grand spectacle, but for the fundamental severing of a familial bond, a loss of acceptance from the people who had brought me into this world. As the sun climbed higher, painting the room in warm hues, I started to prepare. Every movement felt heavy, laden with a mix of anticipation and sorrow. Putting on my simple white dress, adjusting the delicate veil Melissa had helped me choose, each action was a step further into this new chapter and a step further away from the old. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened the small pearl earrings, a gift from Melissa, a symbol of our shared future. The mirror reflected a woman standing on the precipice of profound change, both liberated and, in a way, still grieving. Just then, Melissa stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, then widened into a beautiful, sleepy smile as she saw me. That smile, so full of warmth and love, was like a lifeline. It pulled me back from the edge of my despair, grounding me in the present moment. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, then her gaze sharpened, sensing my somber mood. "Hey," she whispered, her voice still husky with sleep. "You okay?" I walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, reaching for her hand. "Yeah," I mumbled, "just a lot of feelings." I couldn't articulate the complex tapestry of grief, relief, sadness, and excitement that was warring inside me. How do you explain the ache of being disowned on the happiest day of your life? Melissa squeezed my hand, her thumb gently stroking my knuckles. She knew. She always did. She didn't press for details. She didn't offer empty words of comfort. Instead, she just looked into my eyes, her own filled with an unwavering understanding and boundless love. Then she leaned closer, her voice soft but firm, a steady anchor in my emotional storm. "Hey, look at me," she said gently, tilting my chin up so our eyes met. "We don't need their blessing to be whole." Those words, they weren't just a comfort. They were a revelation. They cut through the noise of my ingrained fears, the echoes of my father's disapproval, and the persistent desire for external validation. They were a powerful affirmation of our love, our strength, our self-sufficiency. We don't need their blessing to be whole. It was a simple truth, yet profound in its impact. It wasn't about defiance. It was about defining our own completeness, our own family, our own happiness, independent of anyone else's approval. In that moment, a fundamental shift occurred within me. The shadow of my father's absence didn't disappear completely, but it shrank, becoming less oppressive. Melissa's words were a quiet declaration of our self-worth, a reminder that our love was valid and strong on its own. We weren't asking for permission. We were simply being. A small, genuine smile finally touched my lips. I squeezed her hand back. "You're right," I whispered the words, feeling lighter than I expected. "You are so, so right." We spent the next hour getting ready, but the atmosphere had changed. The earlier melancholy had given way to a quiet, resolute joy. We helped each other with last-minute touches, shared quiet jokes, and stole glances filled with an understanding that transcended words. The wedding wasn't just an event anymore. It was a defiant act of self-love and mutual commitment, a testament to the fact that we were building our own world brick by brick, with or without the approval of those who chose to remain outside its walls. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the window, bathing us in its golden light. It felt like a blessing, not from above, but from within, from the strength of our own bond. The morning of my wedding was indeed a mix of sunshine and shadow, but Melissa's love had shown me where the true light resided. I was ready to walk not alone, but towards the woman who made me feel more whole than I had ever been. The moment arrived. The music began to play, a soft, ethereal melody that filled the air of the botanical garden where our ceremony was held. The path to the altar stretched before me, lined with familiar faces bathed in the gentle morning light. This was it, the walk down the aisle, a journey I had once envisioned so differently, now imbued with an entirely new, profound meaning. I stood at the entrance of the aisle, my heart beating a steady rhythm against my ribs. I took a deep breath, the scent of blooming flowers filling my lungs. My eyes scanned the faces of our guests, Friends, colleagues, distant relatives of Melissa, and even some newfound allies from the LGBTQ+ community who had heard our story through mutual connections. Their smiles were warm, their eyes filled with genuine joy and support. It was a beautiful sight, a testament to the community we had built around us. But then my gaze drifted to the empty space beside me, the space where my father should have stood. The silence from my family was a tangible presence, a heavy void that lingered despite the warmth of the surroundings. For a fleeting second, the old ache returned, a sharp pang of what could have been, what should have been. I could almost hear the rustle of his suit, feel the sturdy grip of his arm. But it was just an echo, a ghost of a past that no longer belonged to me. And then I took my first step. Each step was a goodbye. With that first step, a strange transformation began. It wasn't just a physical movement. It was a journey of the soul. My vision narrowed, focusing only on the path ahead, and on Melissa waiting for me at the end of it. The first step was a goodbye to the expectations. The crushing weight of what I was supposed to be, the perfect daughter, the conventional bride. I shed it like an old skin, leaving it behind with every inch I moved forward. It was a goodbye to the endless striving for approval, the constant fear of disappointing him. The second step was a goodbye to the guilt, the insidious feeling that I was inherently wrong, that my love was somehow flawed or shameful. I had carried that burden for so long, letting it define my sense of self. With each deliberate movement, I consciously released it, letting it dissolve into the morning air. The third step was a goodbye to the pain of rejection. The raw wound of his silence, his harsh judgment. It still hurt, yes, but now it was a pain. I was acknowledging, accepting, and then moving beyond. It was a pain that no longer held power over my future. As I continued down the aisle, I wasn't walking alone in spirit. Though my father's arm wasn't linked in mine, I felt surrounded by an invisible, powerful force. It was the love of Melissa beaming at me from the altar. It was the unwavering support of my friends, their silent cheers urging me on. I saw Liam, my college roommate, blinking back tears of joy. I saw Sarah, a colleague from my first job, giving me a strong, encouraging nod. I saw Melissa's parents, their eyes brimming with a warmth that enveloped me like a comforting blanket. Each step solidified my resolve. My spine straightened, my chin lifted. The initial flicker of sadness gave way to an overwhelming sense of empowerment. This wasn't a walk of shame or sorrow. This was a walk of liberation, a defiant march towards my truth. Every footfall resonated with a quiet power, a statement that my happiness was non-negotiable, my love unbreakable. I wasn't just walking towards Melissa, I was walking towards my authentic self, towards a future where I was defined by my choices, my love and my values, not by the outdated traditions or rigid beliefs of others. The sun dappled through the leaves overhead, creating a kaleidoscope of light and shadow on the path, as if nature itself was celebrating this moment of profound personal freedom. The music swelled, guiding me forward. I could hear Melissa's soft breathing as I got closer, see the unshed tears glistening in her eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of profound love. She was my destination, my safe harbor, the person who had loved me into being this courageous, unbroken woman. When I finally reached the end of the aisle, Melissa extended her hand to me, her touch warm and firm. As our fingers intertwined, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The void where my father should have been was no longer empty. It was filled with the overwhelming presence of genuine love, acceptance, and a future brighter than I had ever dared to dream. I looked into Melissa's eyes, and in their depths I saw not pity, but pride. Not sorrow, but pure, unadulterated joy. I stood there, not a heartbroken daughter, but a brave woman ready to embark on a beautiful life with the person I loved. The silent walk had ended, but a new, powerful journey had just begun. And in that moment, under the open sky surrounded by love, I knew I was not alone. I was more whole than I had ever been. Standing before Melissa, her hand clasped firmly in mine, the world outside faded away. The gentle murmur of the guests, the distant city hum, everything blurred into an insignificant background. All that existed was us bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun, ready to speak the words that would bind our lives together. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a profound act of creation, building a future on the bedrock of genuine love. Our efficient, a dear friend who had witnessed our journey from its early tentative steps, smiled warmly at us. Her voice was calm and reassuring, guiding us through the sacred moments. But it was when we turned to face each other, ready to exchange our vows, that time seemed to truly stand still. Melissa went first. Her eyes, usually full of playful mischief, were now brimming with a tenderness that brought tears to my own. Her voice, though slightly trembling, was clear and resonant, each word a testament to her beautiful heart. "Julia," she began, her gaze unwavering, "when I first met you, you were like a beautifully wrapped gift, so carefully presented, but I could sense the vibrant spirit struggling to break free underneath. You carried a quiet strength, a gentle soul, but also a deep, unspoken pain. You taught me what true resilience looks like. You showed me that vulnerability is a superpower, not a weakness. And in you, I found a reflection of my own deepest desires for a love that is honest, brave, and boundless. You have opened my world not just to a new kind of love, but to a deeper understanding of myself. I promise to be your steadfast anchor in every storm, your loudest cheerleader in every triumph. I promise to cherish your quiet moments and celebrate your wild dreams. I promise to always see you, truly see you for the incredible woman you are, and to love every single part of you fiercely and unconditionally. With you, Julia, I am home. And I promise to build that home with you brick by brick, laugh by laugh, tear by tear, for all the days of my life. You are my greatest adventure, my deepest peace. I choose you always." Her words were like a balm to my soul, healing wounds I hadn't even realized were still bleeding. She didn't just see the person I was. She saw the person I could be, the person I was meant to be. Her vows were a pure reflection of the unconditional love I had always craved, but never truly received from my family. Then it was my turn. My voice was thick with emotion, but a profound sense of certainty guided my words. All the years of hiding, of striving, of battling internal conflicts, they all converged into this single powerful moment of truth. "Melissa," I began, my voice clear. "Despite the tremor before you, I lived in a world of muted colors, a life where I felt like a fragile porcelain doll carefully placed to please. You came into my life like a burst of vibrant paint shattering the glass case around me. You taught me to breathe, to truly feel, to finally embrace the woman I was not, the one I was expected to be. You didn't just love me, you liberated me. You showed me that my truth was not a source of shame, but a source of strength. You stood by me when my own family turned away, and in your unwavering belief, I found the courage to stand tall. You became my safe harbor, my guiding star, the unwavering proof that love doesn't need external validation to be real, to be powerful. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word, your confidant, your adventurer, your comfort. I promise to listen with an open heart, to challenge you to grow, and to celebrate every victory, big or small. I promise to protect the beautiful, authentic life we are building together, and to fill it with laughter, kindness, and boundless joy. With you, Melissa, I don't just feel loved, I feel complete. And I promise you, my entire heart, my unwavering loyalty, and my deepest, truest love for all of time. You are my today and all of my tomorrows. As I finished, a wave of emotion washed over the gathered guests. Many had tears streaming down their faces, not of sadness, but of profound understanding and shared joy. Our vows weren't just personal promises. They were a testament to the power of authentic love, a beacon for anyone who had ever felt like an outcast. They were a declaration that love in its purest form transcends all boundaries, all expectations, all judgments. In that moment, standing hand in hand, looking into Melissa's tear-filled eyes, I knew that every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had led me to this exact place. This was more than just a wedding. It was a deeply spiritual affirmation of who we were, who we had become together. We had created our own sacred space, a sanctuary where our love reigned supreme, unburdened by the shadows of the past. The vows had sealed not just our commitment to each other, but my own commitment to living my truth openly and proudly for the rest of my life. The day after the wedding felt surreal. Melissa and I woke up to the quiet hum of our new reality basking in the glow of our vows, the joy of having made that profound commitment. It was a perfect intimate day, exactly what we had dreamed of. We didn't expect our small personal ceremony to reach beyond our closest circle. We just wanted to celebrate our love authentically and without compromise. We had hired a wonderful, discreet videographer to capture the moments mostly for ourselves and for those who couldn't attend. We thought it would be a beautiful keepsake, a private memory of a sacred day. A few days after the wedding, when we received the edited video, we watched it together curled up on our sofa, reliving every smile, every tear, every tender glance. It was perfect, a raw emotional testament to our love. Melissa, always the more public of us, suggested we share a short highlight reel on social media. Just for our friends, Jay, she said, so they can see the magic. I was hesitant, still cautious about putting our story out there, but her enthusiasm was infectious. So we posted it. A simple 3-minute video, snippets of the silent walk. Melissa's tearful vows, my own trembling words, and our first kiss as wives. What happened next was something neither of us could have ever predicted. The video didn't just get a few likes from friends. It exploded. Within hours, it had thousands of views. Within a day, hundreds of thousands. By the end of the week, it had gone viral. It wasn't just shares. It was comments, reshares, mentions by online communities and news outlets. The internet, often a space for negativity, had unexpectedly become a conduit for our love story. People resonated with it. They saw the vulnerability, the courage, the raw emotion in every frame. The silent walk in particular became a powerful symbol. Strangers left comments like, "Her father missed out on walking an actual queen down the aisle," or, "This isn't a walk alone. This is a walk of pure strength." Our vows were transcribed and shared, becoming an anthem for unconditional love. The video wasn't just about two women getting married. It was about defining your own family, finding joy amidst adversity, and choosing authenticity above all else. But beyond the numbers and the internet buzz, what truly touched my heart were the messages. An avalanche of private messages began to pour into my inboxes, on social media, via our wedding website, even through Melissa's art page. They came from all corners of the world, from people I had never met, people whose lives mirrored my own in startling ways. Many were from LGBTQ+ individuals, young and old, who shared their own painful experiences of family rejection. They wrote about parents who disowned them, siblings who ostracized them, or the silent, suffocating disapproval they lived with every day. "Your walk gave me courage." One young woman wrote, "My father refused to come to my graduation when I came out. Seeing you strong and beautiful, walking alone but surrounded by love, made me cry, but also feel so much hope." Another shared, "I'm 60 years old and still hide who I am from my family. Your story made me realize it's never too late to live your truth." There were messages from parents too, some filled with regret for how they had treated their own children, seeking advice on how to bridge the gap. Others were parents of LGBTQ+ children, sending messages of solidarity and love, thanking us for being a visible example of happiness. Each message was a thread in a vast tapestry of shared human experience, a reminder that I was not alone in my struggle. My personal pain, once a source of shame, was now a bridge connecting me to countless others. The embarrassment my father had so coldly spoken of had transformed into a beacon of hope for strangers. This outpouring of support, this unexpected connection with a global community, was profoundly healing. For so long I had carried the burden of my father's disapproval, feeling fractured and incomplete. But seeing our story resonate with so many, witnessing the courage it inspired in others, began to mend those old wounds. The emptiness left by my father's absence at the altar was slowly, beautifully filled by the overwhelming affirmation of humanity. It was a profound realization. My happiness, my authentic self, was not just for me and Melissa. It had become a testament, a quiet act of empowerment for others. I was no longer just Julia Harper, the daughter who had failed to meet expectations. I was Julia Harper, the woman who walked her own path, found true love, and in doing so unknowingly ignited a spark of hope in the hearts of thousands. It was a silent revenge indeed, not of malice, but of thriving so brightly that my light reached far beyond the shadows of my past. In this newfound purpose, I felt a completeness I never thought possible. Life with Melissa had blossomed into a beautiful, vibrant reality. The viral video of our wedding continued to garner heartwarming messages, and the unexpected outpouring of support filled a void I hadn't realized was so profound. I felt a sense of peace, a completeness that had eluded me for so long. 1 month after the wedding, just as I was fully settling into this new, authentic chapter, a familiar name appeared in my inbox. My father's name. Robert Harper. My heart gave a strange lurch. It wasn't excitement, not exactly. It was a complex mix of apprehension, curiosity, and a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of the old hope. The one that still stubbornly wished for a true reconciliation. I stared at the subject line. Regarding your recent choices. No warm greeting, no personal salutation. Just cold formal language. It was exactly what I should have expected. And yet, it still sent a shiver down my spine. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and clicked open the email. It wasn't a short message. It was a lengthy, meticulously crafted piece of prose, almost like a legal document. Every word was carefully chosen, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. There were no apologies, not even a hint of regret. Instead, it was a long, drawn-out accusation. Dear Julia, the email began, already setting a formal distance. I write to you today, not with anger, but with a profound sense of disappointment and sorrow for the path you have chosen. Your recent actions, specifically, the public display of your union, have brought a regrettable amount of attention to our family, attention we neither sought nor desired. This is not the life we envisioned for you, nor is it the legacy we have upheld for generations. He went on, detailing how my choices had disrupted the natural order, how I had deviated from the values instilled in me since childhood. He spoke of tradition, honor, and the sacred institution of marriage, all terms that, coming from him, felt hollow and devoid of true meaning when applied to my love. He listed almost clinically the expectations he had held for me: a respectable husband, a family that mirrored his own conventional image, a life of quiet conformity. Each point was a hammer blow, systematically dismantling any shred of hope that he might understand, might soften. What struck me most was the complete absence of any personal feeling. There was no mention of my happiness, my well-being, or even a fleeting acknowledgement of Melissa. It was all about him, about his family, about his expectations and how I had failed to meet them. He didn't ask how I was, didn't inquire about the wedding itself, didn't show even a flicker of curiosity about the life I was building. It was a monologue, a final lecture delivered from a place of unyielding certainty. He was not trying to understand. He was merely stating his unchanging position. He detailed how my actions had caused unnecessary talk among their social circles, how it reflected poorly on his standing in the community. It was clear his primary concern was reputation, not relationship. My love, my identity, my happiness. These were secondary, irrelevant even compared to the perceived stain on the Harper name. He painted a picture of a distraught mother burdened by my wayward path, implying that her suffering was also my fault. It was a masterful act of emotional manipulation designed to elicit guilt and force me back into line. The email concluded with a stark, uncompromising sentence, a final ultimatum wrapped in a veneer of parental concern. If you ever come to your senses, you know where to find us. That was it. Come to your senses. As if my love for Melissa, my courage to live authentically, was a temporary delusion, a fit of madness that I would eventually snap out of. It was an invitation not to reconciliation but to surrender. To renounce my truth, to deny my happiness, and return to the rigid confines of his world. I read the email again and again. The words sank in, chilling me to the bone. The faint hope I had harbored finally evaporated, leaving behind a stark clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a fundamental incompatibility of values, a chasm too wide to bridge. There was no path to his acceptance that didn't involve me abandoning myself. My response was a quiet, deliberate act of defiance. I didn't reply. I didn't send back an angry retort. I didn't try to explain myself further. I didn't beg for his understanding. His email had been his final word, and my silence would be mine. My silence was not a sign of weakness or defeat. It was a testament to my newfound strength, my unwavering commitment to my own happiness. I had finally learned that I didn't need to justify my existence, my love, or my choices to anyone, especially not to someone who refused to see me as a whole, valid person. Melissa found me later looking at the screen. She didn't ask what the email said. She simply wrapped her arms around me. In her embrace, I felt the truth. I was already home. My senses were perfectly intact. I had found my way, and it was glorious even without their blessing. The chapter of seeking their approval was finally definitively closed. A year had passed since my wedding, since my father's chilling email, since the final resounding silence. Life with Melissa was a tapestry woven with joy, laughter, and an ever-deepening love. We were building our life, our home, our future, with a fierce determination that defied the shadows of the past. Yet there remained a tiny, persistent tug in my heart, a quiet concern for my mother. She had always been the softer presence, the silent observer, and I often wondered how she was truly faring in the wake of our estrangement. I hadn't seen my mother in person since that fateful day I came out. Our phone calls had dwindled to sporadic, strained conversations, mostly initiated by her always skirting around the edges of my new life. I knew she was caught between her unwavering loyalty to my father and her maternal love for me, a suffocating position I wouldn't wish on anyone. This unaddressed longing to connect with her, to at least see her face, finally prompted a decision. I would visit, not to reconcile with my father, not to seek forgiveness, but simply to check on my mother to see if there was any flicker of the warmth I remembered from childhood. I drove to my hometown alone, Melissa offering her quiet support, but understanding this was a journey I needed to take by myself. The familiar streets, the quaint houses, the old oak tree on Main Street. Everything looked exactly the same, yet it felt profoundly alien. The air was thick with memories, ghosts of a past I no longer inhabited. As I pulled up to my childhood home, the meticulously manicured lawn, the polished front door, it all screamed of an unchanging order. My stomach tightened. I rang the doorbell. My mother answered, her eyes widening in surprise, then quickly softening with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Julia," she whispered, her voice fragile, pulling me into a hesitant embrace. It was brief, almost fleeting, as if she was afraid of being seen, or perhaps afraid of what my presence might stir. I stepped inside. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Perfectly clean, impeccably organized, every item in its designated place. The same floral patterns on the curtains, the same antique clock ticking softly in the hallway. But the air felt heavy, oppressive, filled with an unspoken tension. My father was not there. My mother simply said, "Your father is out," her voice carefully neutral, avoiding eye contact. It was clear this visit was unsanctioned, perhaps even a covert operation on her part. We sat in the living room, surrounded by the familiar furniture, yet feeling like strangers. Our conversation was stilted, filled with long pauses. We talked about trivial things: the weather, the local church bake sale, my career path, carefully omitting any mention of my organization or Melissa, a silent agreement of what was safe to discuss. It was a polite performance, a dance around the elephant in the room that had grown into a giant. As we talked, my gaze drifted around the room. On the mantelpiece above the fireplace sat an array of framed photographs, family portraits, milestones, cherished memories. My eyes scanned them searching. There was a picture of me graduating high school, a younger, more innocent Julia smiling brightly. Then a photo from a family vacation years ago. And then I saw it. A picture of me from my early college years standing next to my old boyfriend. We were smiling arm in arm, a perfectly heterosexual couple. My heart dropped. It wasn't just that the picture was there. It was that it was the most recent photo of me on display. There were no pictures of me and Melissa. No photos from my adult life. No indication of the woman I had become, the life I had built. It was as if my existence had been frozen in time, specifically at the point where I still fit their predetermined narrative. The woman who stood before them, now married to another woman, a beacon of LGBTQ+ empowerment, was simply unseen. In that moment, a profound and chilling realization washed over me. This wasn't just about their disapproval of my sexuality. It was about their complete denial of my current reality. They weren't just refusing to accept my partner. They were refusing to acknowledge me. They were actively clinging to a past version of me, a version that was palatable to their traditional views, a version that never existed beyond their own rigid expectations. They were living in a past that I no longer belonged to. The house wasn't just filled with unspoken words. It was filled with unspoken years. Years of my life they had chosen to ignore, to erase. They weren't just turning away from my marriage. They were turning away from my growth, my journey, my very being. The air in the room, once merely heavy, now felt like a thick, impenetrable wall. There was no bridge to be built here, no common ground to be found. They had chosen to remain in their static, idealized past, and I had moved irrevocably forward. I looked at my mother, her face etched with a quiet sadness that seemed to mirror the stagnant air in the house. I knew she loved me in her own way, bound by her own fears and loyalties. But she was part of this static existence, unable or unwilling to step out of the shadows cast by my father's rigidity. The visit was short. I offered polite goodbyes, the words feeling empty in the vast silence of the house. As I walked out the door and got back into my car, the relief that washed over me was immense. It wasn't the kind of relief you feel after escaping danger, but the kind that comes with a painful, undeniable truth. I had hoped for a thread, a sliver of connection, but found only an empty museum of a life that was no longer mine. This final visit, though painful, served a crucial purpose. It cemented my understanding. I had truly, definitively moved on, and it was time to let them go completely. The final visit to my childhood home, that strange silent encounter, was the turning point. It was the last thread I clung to, a desperate hope for a connection that simply no longer existed. Seeing that old photo on the mantelpiece, a ghost of a past they preferred, was the stark, undeniable truth. It wasn't just about them disapproving of Melissa. It was about them refusing to see me, the woman I had become, the life I had built. And in that raw, painful realization, I found a profound clarity. It was time to let go. Completely. The decision wasn't made lightly. It was born from months, even years of heartache and striving. But now it felt less like a loss and more like a necessary act of self-preservation. I couldn't keep watering a dead plant. I couldn't keep knocking on a door that was bolted shut from the inside. To truly live, to truly thrive, I needed to release myself from the constant yearning for their approval, for a family that didn't accept all of me. After that visit, I cut contact completely. No more strained phone calls with my mother, no more checking for a phantom email from my father. I removed their numbers from my phone, unfollowed what little social media presence they had. It wasn't an act of anger or spite. It was an act of profound self-love. It was setting boundaries not to punish them, but to protect my own peace and happiness. It was a silent declaration. My well-being matters, and I deserve to be loved and accepted for who I am. The initial days were quiet, almost eerily so, like the calm after a long storm. There was a lingering sadness, a ghost of what might have been, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of profound relief. The constant anxiety, the relentless internal conflict finally began to dissipate. With that weight lifted, Melissa and I poured all our energy into building our own home, our own family. Our small apartment, once a temporary haven, became a vibrant, joyful space that truly reflected who we were. We filled it with art, with books, with music that made us dance in the kitchen. We created traditions that were uniquely ours, celebrating holidays and milestones with friends who had become our chosen family. There was no pretense, no hiding, no need to perform, just genuine, unadulterated happiness. Melissa was my rock, my partner in every sense. Her unwavering love and belief in me had been the catalyst for so much of my growth. Now, in this shared space, our love deepened further, blossoming into something even richer and more beautiful. We navigated the everyday joys and challenges of life together, always with an open heart and a ready laugh. Every shared meal, every quiet evening on the sofa, every silly inside joke. These were the building blocks of our new life, solid and unshakable. As our love grew, so did our dreams. We often talked about the future, about expanding our family. We knew early on that building our family through adoption felt like the right path for us. It was a conscious choice, an act of love to bring a child into a home filled with acceptance, warmth, and unconditional support. Everything I had yearned for in my own upbringing. The process of adoption was long and challenging, filled with paperwork, interviews, and moments of anxious waiting. But through it all, Melissa and I were a team. We supported each other, laughed through the frustrations, and held on to the dream of becoming parents. And then one glorious day, our dream became a reality. We were approved to adopt a beautiful baby girl. Her name is Lily. The moment we first held her in our arms, it was as if the universe had clicked into perfect alignment. Her tiny hand gripping my finger, her soft sighs as she slept. Every fiber of my being resonated with a love so pure, so overwhelming it eclipsed every past hurt. Being a mother alongside Melissa was the most profound and fulfilling experience of my life. Our home, once just an apartment, truly became a sanctuary. It was filled with the sounds of Lily's laughter, the gentle hum of lullabies, and the quiet joy of a family created by choice, bound by love. We made sure Lily knew she was cherished, that she was loved for exactly who she was, with no conditions attached. We created an environment where her curiosity was encouraged, her emotions validated, and her individuality celebrated. In the quiet moments, watching Melissa play with Lily, or feeling Lily's warm weight asleep on my chest, I sometimes thought of my father. The image of the old photo in his house would flash through my mind. But the pang of sadness was now fleeting, distant. It was replaced by a profound sense of peace. I had built my own legacy, a legacy of love, acceptance, and an unbreakable family unit. The past was no longer a wound. It was merely a part of my story, a backdrop against which my vibrant present shone even brighter. I had truly let go, and in doing so, I had finally found true freedom and boundless happiness. My journey wasn't about seeking their approval anymore. It was about living a life so full of authentic love that it spoke for itself. 3 years had passed since I had last seen my parents, since that final silent visit to my childhood home. 3 years since I made the conscious, necessary choice to completely cut ties, allowing myself the space to truly heal and flourish. In that time, our life with Lily had become a symphony of love and laughter, a testament to the family Melissa and I had intentionally built. My professional life had also taken an unexpected, fulfilling turn, fueled by my own experiences, by the countless messages from strangers who had resonated with my story, and by a deep desire to prevent others from enduring the pain I had faced. I poured my energy into a new mission. I co-founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting LGBTQ+ homeless youth. It started as a small initiative driven by passion and a handful of dedicated volunteers. We provided shelter resources and, most importantly, a safe, accepting community for young people who, like me, had been rejected by their families for simply being themselves. The organization grew rapidly. Our work gained recognition, attracting media attention and significant donations. We expanded our services, built more shelters, and became a beacon of hope for countless young lives. I found a profound sense of purpose in this work, transforming my past pain into a powerful force for good. Every young person we helped, every life we touched, was a silent, powerful affirmation of my choices, a living testament that my embarrassment was, in fact, my greatest strength. I often spoke at conferences, shared my personal journey, and advocated for greater acceptance and understanding. My voice, once silenced by fear, now resonated with strength and conviction. It was through one of these public appearances, a keynote speech at a national LGBTQ+ youth conference, that the news eventually reached my parents. Not directly from me, of course. My silence had been absolute. But in a small, close-knit community like my hometown, news has a way of traveling. My success, my visibility, my new role as a prominent advocate, it eventually filtered back to them through the neighbors. I imagined the hushed whispers, the subtle shifts in conversation among the older women at church, the men at the lumber mill. It was a strange, almost poetic turn of events that the very community whose judgment my father had so desperately tried to uphold was now the conduit for news of my unconventional success. My father, true to form, remained silent. There was no phone call, no email, no acknowledgement whatsoever. His refusal to engage his unyielding pride remained unbroken. I didn't expect anything less. His silence was now simply part of the landscape of my life, a distant, fading echo. But then one afternoon an envelope arrived in the mail. It was addressed to me in my mother's familiar, elegant handwriting. My heart tightened. After 3 years a letter, my hand trembled slightly as I opened it. There was no return address, just the postmark from my hometown. Inside there was a single sheet of paper. No lengthy diatribe, no demands, no pleas. Just a few lines written in her neat, flowing script. Julia, it began simply. No dear or formal opening. Just my name, as if whispered across the distance. We saw your speech. It was beautiful. And that was all. No explanation. No apologies for the past. No expectations for the future. Just that one short, powerful sentence. We saw your speech. It was beautiful. The word we hung in the air, ambiguous yet undeniably significant. Did it include my father? Was it just her? It didn't matter. What mattered was the acknowledgement, the unspoken pride, the quiet, almost imperceptible softening of a heart that had been caught in the crossfire for so long. It was a small gesture, perhaps, but for me it was a seismic shift. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a recognition. After years of being erased, of being a source of embarrassment, my mother had finally, albeit subtly, acknowledged my truth, my strength, my impact. Her words were a validation not just of my speech, but of the life I had built, the person I had become. It was a quiet acknowledgement that despite everything she had seen my light. In that moment, holding the letter, I realized that my silent revenge wasn't about proving them wrong or about making them regret. It was about proving to myself that I was enough. And now, even in this small, unexpected way, a piece of that truth had finally reached them. It was a full circle moment, a testament to the idea that living your truth authentically and with purpose is the most powerful statement you can ever make. The letter from my mother, so brief yet so profound, rested on my nightstand for days. It was a silent conversation across years of silence, a tiny bridge built of ink and paper. It didn't erase the past, but it softened the sharp edges of old wounds. It was a testament to the incredible journey I had taken, a journey from a frightened young girl seeking approval to a woman standing firmly in her own truth, surrounded by the love she had cultivated. As I reflected on that journey, on the pain, the struggle, the eventual triumph, my thoughts often drifted back to that younger Julia, the 16-year-old girl lying awake in her bed, feeling utterly alone, convinced she was fundamentally broken, carrying a secret that felt like a curse. If I could go back, if I could whisper words of comfort and wisdom to her, what would I say? What message would I send across time to alleviate her fear and guide her through the darkness? So I wrote a letter, not for my parents, not for the world to see, but a deeply personal message for that struggling young version of myself, and by extension for anyone else out there who might be feeling the same profound isolation. My dearest younger self, if you're reading this, you're likely feeling lost, confused, and terrified. You're wrestling with a secret that feels too big, too shameful to ever share. You look at your reflection and see someone who doesn't fit, someone who can never truly be loved for who they are. You're trying so hard to be the person everyone expects to earn that elusive nod of approval, but deep down, you know it's a performance. I know how heavy that burden is. I know the fear of disappointing the people you love, especially your father. You believe their love is conditional, and right now you think you're failing the test. You're bracing for the heartbreak for the moment they might turn away. And here's the truth, my dear. They might. They might turn away. The path ahead will be filled with moments of profound pain, moments when you feel utterly abandoned. You will walk down an aisle alone, not just on your wedding day, but many times in life as you choose a path less traveled. But listen to me closely. You are not broken. You are not a mistake. Your feelings, your heart, your truest self, they are beautiful and valid. The love you will one day find, the love that will define your life, is not something you need to be cured of. It is a gift, a profound truth waiting to unfold. Be brave. Be unapologetically yourself, even when it feels like the whole world is telling you not to be. Find your chosen family, the people who see you, truly see you and love you without conditions. They are out there waiting to embrace you. Their love will be the softest blanket, the strongest shield. And to anyone out there who feels like I did, standing on the precipice of their own truth, fearing rejection from the very people who should offer unconditional love, you are not alone. Your story matters. Your love is real. And your worth is not and never will be determined by someone else's approval or disapproval. You will find strength in unexpected places, in the quiet resilience of your own heart, in the unwavering support of friends who become family, and in the profound impact your authentic life can have on others. Your journey, no matter how painful it feels right now, is leading you to a place of profound liberation and purpose. One day you'll look back and realize that every tear, every struggle, every lonely step was a brick laid on the foundation of your incredible life. You will build a family not out of obligation, but out of boundless love. You will find joy in places you never expected, and you will become a beacon for others who are still navigating their own shadows. So, my dear, never forget this. You are not broken. You are brave. And one day you'll walk down the aisle with or without them, and you'll know that you are enough. More than enough. You are whole. You are loved. And you are free. And that's my story. A journey from silent pain to resounding freedom. If any part of my story resonated with you, if it sparked a memory or offered a glimmer of hope, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Your engagement helps us share more stories like mine, stories of resilience, love, and empowerment. Join our community in the comments below. Share your own thoughts, your own experiences, or simply let us know how this story impacted you. Your voice adds to the collective strength. And stay tuned, because there are countless other stories waiting to be told, waiting to inspire, and waiting to show us all that true love and acceptance always find a way. Thank you for listening.